Chosen one, welcome, the anointed ones. Some people were created to fit in, others were created to glitch the entire simulation. Chosen ones, the world's about to realize you weren't built to blend. You were built to break patterns. You know that feeling when your Wi-Fi suddenly reconnects after hours of chaos and every notification hits at once? That's what your comeback feels like. Divine updates downloading all at once. According to behavioral science, people remember shock more than comfort. And right now, the universe is setting you up to become the shockwave. This isn't a regular return. You didn't crawl back from your downfall. You recalibrated your entire existence. While they were expecting a new you, God was constructing a completely different species. You see, while everyone thought you disappeared, you were actually being reformatted in the background, quietly replacing your emotional software and its strength, deleting outdated attachments and upgrading your spiritual firewalls. You didn't just heal, you evolved past the frequency that broke you. And now, the same world that thought it saw your final act is about to realize that your story was just buffering. You're not coming back for revenge. You're coming back in revelation mode. The version of you that's emerging now isn't trying to prove anything. It is the proof. So brace yourself, because what's about to happen isn't a glow-up. It's a divine reintroduction, the kind where people stop mid-conversation, blink twice, and whisper, "Wait, who even is that?" Number one, you didn't just bounce back. You reconstructed the blueprint. That's not resilience. That's divine engineering. Most people recover by trying to rebuild what they lost, but you tore down the whole design and started again from truth, not trauma. You realized that the old version of you wasn't destroyed by life. It expired because it was never your original configuration to begin with. Every pain, betrayal, and downfall didn't just test you. It revealed where the foundation had cracks that weren't meant to hold the kind of purpose you carry. When everything fell apart, it wasn't sabotage. It was excavation. You were being stripped down to your raw material, the part of you that was never touched by conditioning or compromise. The world teaches you to survive by repair, but chosen ones survive by reinvention. That's why your comeback feels different. It's not built on what people remember. It's built on what they've never seen. You didn't rebuild your life to match expectations. You rebuilt it to match your divine blueprint, the one that was buried under years of manipulation, self-doubt, and false humility. Now you're operating from a structure that doesn't need validation to stand. You don't need applause to confirm your worth because your confidence is no longer external. It's encoded. You've become unshakable because you're finally aligned with your original coordinates. That's why the same things that used to destroy your peace can't even reach you anymore. They're trying to attack an old floor plan that no longer exists. You've updated your entire spiritual architecture while they're still knocking on doors that lead nowhere. And that's what makes your comeback so shocking. It's not a return. It's a redesign. The version of you that's reemerging isn't improved. It's authentic. You're not going back to what was, you're stepping into what always should have been. The pain didn't just build you, it built something through you that even you didn't know existed. You've become proof that divine construction doesn't start with comfort. It starts with demolition. Now the world will have to adapt to your new structure. You didn't just rebuild, you raised the standard. You're not a comeback story. You're the original design restored. And that's why the world won't recognize you. They've never met the real blueprint before. Number two, you became the evidence that divinity doesn't need validation. That's the difference between you and everyone who tried to explain you away. People spend their whole lives trying to prove they're chosen, gifted, or worthy. But your proof doesn't come from words. It comes from what survived you. You didn't just talk about faith, you became what faith looks like when there's nothing left to hold on to but trust. Every setback, every silent season, every disappointment refined your essence until you no longer needed to convince anyone that God was with you. Your life started doing the talking for you. What makes you stand out isn't perfection. It's precision. The way things align for you. The way doors open when everyone counted you out. The way you're guided by timing no one else can predict. That's divine evidence. It's not coincidence, it's coordination. The kind of coordination that only comes from something higher managing your narrative. That's why people are shocked. They can't understand how someone they dismissed became someone they can't ignore. They thought validation was your fuel, not realizing silence was your laboratory. While they were performing for applause, you were being prepared for purpose. You became the evidence that God doesn't need a stage to prove power. Your survival was the sermon. Your peace after chaos was the prophecy fulfilled. You're the living contradiction that exposes how wrong people were about you, not because you argued your way out, but because your existence disproved every false narrative they created. They said you were finished, yet here you are thriving on a frequency that no human approval could ever reach. That's what happens when you stop chasing proof and start becoming it. You start walking in a confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. You don't fight for respect. It rearranges itself around you. Validation becomes irrelevant when your life itself becomes verification. You are no longer asking the world to see your worth. Your presence now demands it. You're not a testimony spoken. You're a testimony walking. You didn't just rise again. You turned into the very evidence that divine timing and endurance can't be faked. You are the receipt that heaven keeps on display to remind the world that grace doesn't negotiate with human opinion. Number 3, they tried to read you using human logic, but you're written in spirit. That's why so many people misunderstood you. They used the language of emotion, ego, and assumption to decode something that was never written in that dialect. You've always been spiritually encrypted. The way you think, feel, and move doesn't follow the standard script. You're not random. You're divinely patterned. But because your actions didn't make sense to those stuck in lower frequencies, they labeled you strange, inconsistent, or unstable. When in truth, you were operating by instructions they were never authorized to access. Human logic loves control, but spiritual flow loves surrender. And you've been living from that surrender. Every decision that looked like a loss was guided by wisdom your mind couldn't explain, but your soul couldn't ignore. You've been led by signals, not signs. That's why your timing confused people. They couldn't predict your next move because it wasn't based on reasoning. It was based on revelation. To them, your silence was weakness, but to God, it was strategy. They couldn't understand why you pulled back, why you stopped arguing, why you stopped explaining. It's because spirit doesn't debate, it demonstrates. People tried to measure your value by visibility, but your power has always been in alignment. You were never meant to be understood. You were meant to be recognized. There's a difference. Understanding seeks explanation. Recognition comes from resonance. Only those operating on your frequency can truly perceive you. Everyone else keeps misreading your peace as passivity, your detachment as pride, your distance as arrogance, not realizing it's divine insulation. You are hidden not because you're small, but because you're sacred. The world has tried to diagnose what only heaven can define. They wanted formulas, but you operate on flow. That's why nothing predictable can contain you anymore. You are moved by energy, not evidence. You act from faith, not fear. You obey without needing confirmation because your connection doesn't require translation. You're not waiting for signs from the universe. The universe has been taking notes from you. And now that your season of misinterpretation is over, people will finally realize you were never meant to be decoded. You were meant to be felt. You are living proof that spirit outwrites logic every single time. Number 4, You're the cosmic rebuttal to every lie told about you. That means your comeback isn't something you'll have to speak. It's something the universe itself will echo. Every rumor that tried to bury your name became fertilizer for your proof. Every false narrative they spread only expanded the stage for your truth to be revealed. You didn't fight to clear your name because innocence doesn't shout, it exists. And existence, when aligned with divine timing, becomes its own courtroom. You didn't win this by defending yourself. You won it by becoming the contradiction to every accusation. When they said you were finished, life kept resurrecting you. When they said you were broken, your peace became louder than their gossip. When they mocked your silence, it turned into their evidence of guilt. That's divine justice. It never rushes, but it never misses. Your rebirth wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving that truth doesn't die. It reincarnates stronger, clearer, and undeniable. What makes this so powerful is that you didn't need revenge, exposure, or explanation. Your transformation is the loudest rebuttal there is. You're walking around as the very thing they swore you'd never become. Healed, grounded, glowing, and untouchable. Every lie they told now looks ridiculous in the face of your evolution. The same mouths that said you were unstable are now choking on their certainty, trying to reconcile how the version of you they described no longer exists. You didn't just outlive the narrative. You outgrew the frequency that sustained it. This is why chosen ones confuse people. Your vindication doesn't come through confrontation. It comes through divine contradiction. God rewrote your name in the mouths of the same people who tried to destroy it. He let them spread rumors just to give your truth a wider audience. You didn't just come back better. You came back beyond their comprehension. And now your life itself is the closing argument. You are the cosmic rebuttal, the universal no to every lie, the living proof that truth doesn't crumble under pressure. The trial is over, the verdict is in. Your existence alone is the evidence that God wins even when it looks like he's silent. Number 5. Your stillness was the earthquake they never saw coming. They thought your silence meant defeat, that your calmness was evidence of exhaustion, that you had given up on everything you once stood for. What they didn't understand was that your quiet wasn't empty, it was loaded. Every moment you withdrew, you were recalibrating. Every pause was power accumulating beneath the surface. Stillness isn't weakness when it's aligned with divine timing, it's precision. And you've been learning how to move with precision, not emotion. When chosen ones go silent, the universe listens. Because that silence isn't retreat, it's resonance. It's when heaven starts syncing your inner clock with divine opportunity. You weren't doing nothing, you were syncing up. God was removing your dependence on momentum so you could start moving by revelation. The pause was preparation. You were being rewired to stop reacting and start responding to divine cues. That's why when you finally rise again, it will feel like a sudden quake. Everything around you will have to adjust to your new vibration. The ones who once watched you fall will be startled by how you stand now. Not loud, not frantic, but anchored. They were expecting the old you to come back explaining, defending, trying to prove a point. Instead, they'll meet a version of you that doesn't even acknowledge their opinions. That's what real evolution looks like. When you no longer need to prove your transformation, your presence itself becomes the proof. Your silence was never surrender. It was sacred restraint, the kind that shakes foundations when released. And now, your movement carries weight. Every word, every action, every appearance feels different because it's backed by stillness that taught you balance. The energy that once reacted to everything now moves only with intention. You've become so centered that your calm unsettles people who once controlled you through chaos. They can't manipulate what no longer moves on command. Your comeback won't be loud. It'll be undeniable. The shockwave won't come from what you say, but from what your silence has built. You've spent so long gathering strength in the unseen that when you finally step forward, it will feel like the ground itself shifts to make room. Your stillness was never a pause. It was prophecy in progress. Number 6. You're no longer in the healing era. You're in the revelation era. Healing was never the destination. It was the construction phase. It was the behind-the-scenes process where the old layers of you were stripped away to expose what was hidden underneath. The truth. You've done the inner work. You've faced the shadow, confronted your fears, and outgrown your trauma responses. What's happening now isn't restoration. It's revelation. You're not just the person who overcame. You're the person who embodies what overcoming looks like. You're no longer defined by what broke you. You're defined by what awakened in you because of it. This is the point where your story stops being about pain and starts being about power. The world saw your healing as recovery, but in reality, it was initiation. You weren't patching up wounds. You were activating blueprints. You were being taught how to master energy, discern motives, and walk in alignment with something far higher than human understanding. Healing forced you to slow down, to pay attention, to unlearn the illusions that once defined your worth. But now that you've learned them, you're stepping into a space where your clarity is magnetic and your peace is persuasive. The revelation era is when the purpose behind every heartbreak, betrayal, and loss finally shows its face. It's the moment where you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start declaring, "This happened for me." You no longer need closure because you've outgrown the story entirely. You've become the proof that transformation doesn't just repair, it redefines. You used to pray for healing. Now your presence is healing. You carry the energy of completion, the type that doesn't chase, explain, or negotiate. It simply is. People who meet you now won't just see growth, they'll sense divinity. You've entered a stage where your life itself is revelation, evidence that grace doesn't waste pain. Everything you lost taught you what can't be taken. Everything you endured unlocked the power you didn't know you held. You're not returning as a survivor seeking peace. You're emerging as the revelation of what divine purpose looks like in human form. You didn't just heal from what happened, you became the reason it happened, to awaken something the world had forgotten. The unstoppable design of a chosen one, fully aware of who they are. Number 7. You've outgrown the human definition of power. The kind of power the world worships, loud, performative, and rooted in ego, no longer moves you. You've seen what it costs to chase control, and you've learned that real power doesn't need to prove itself. You used to think strength meant being unbreakable, but now you understand it means being untouchable within yourself. You've become grounded in a way that can't be manipulated, bought, or intimidated. That's the difference between control and alignment. Control demands recognition, alignment attracts it. People used to measure power by status, numbers, or influence, but your power doesn't operate in that currency. Yours is energetic, a quiet force that rearranges the room without you saying a word. When you walk in alignment, everything either rises to meet you or naturally falls away. You don't need to chase authority. Your authenticity commands it. You've stopped fighting for the throne because you've realized you are the throne. Wherever you stand becomes sacred ground because your energy sanctifies the space. You no longer waste energy proving your worth to people who are still addicted to domination. You've learned that controlling others is a symptom of inner chaos, while leading yourself is the highest form of mastery. That's why your calm now feels disruptive. It exposes how unstable false power really is. When you stopped reacting, you shifted the entire balance of the game. Those who once felt powerful by provoking you no longer know how to function around you. Your peace has made their manipulation obsolete. The power you carry now is unmanufactured. It's earned through surrender, built through endurance, and maintained through self-awareness. You don't need attention to validate it. Your presence itself is evidence. That's why some people can't stand you, not because you threaten them, but because your energy reminds them of what real sovereignty feels like. You've outgrown the hierarchy mindset. You no longer play to win. You exist to align. This is what divine authority looks like. Power without oppression, strength without arrogance, presence without performance. The world will soon understand that your reign isn't about being above anyone. It's about being within yourself. And when that kind of power moves, everything built on illusion trembles. Number 8. You didn't just heal, you altered the spiritual economy. Every experience that tried to devalue you became the raw material for a completely new exchange rate in your soul. You used to think pain was a debt you had to pay, but now you understand it's an investment that matures when you refuse to let it define you. Every tear, every betrayal, every moment you thought broke you, you turned all of it into spiritual equity. You no longer trade in resentment or revenge. Your currency is wisdom, peace, and emotional mastery. When you heal at that level, you don't just recover. You rewrite what suffering means. You make pain unprofitable for darkness. The same experiences that once drained you now fund your evolution. You've shifted from being emotionally bankrupt to spiritually wealthy, and it shows. You walk differently because you carry value that can't be stolen or faked. You've become so rich in perspective that people who once saw you as fragile now come to you for strength. That's what happens when a chosen one stops identifying with the wound and starts embodying the lesson. The spiritual economy around you has changed because you've stopped giving free energy to things that don't yield growth. Your forgiveness isn't weakness, it's liquidation, clearing out old emotional debts so that new abundance can flow in. You've stopped negotiating your worth with people who can't afford your peace. You don't chase closure anymore because you understand that closure is just another form of emotional taxation. You've outgrown the system that demanded your energy in exchange for validation. And now everyone who tried to profit from your downfall, emotionally, socially, or spiritually, has to pay interest in respect. The same people who dismissed your struggle are now humbled by your strength. They spent their energy devaluing you, and now that your value has multiplied, they can't afford access. You didn't just heal, you flipped the market. Pain no longer depreciates you, it appreciates your worth. Every scar became spiritual stock, and every loss became a dividend of power. Your transformation isn't just personal, it's economic in the unseen realm. You change the exchange rate between pain and purpose. You've proven that trauma can't bankrupt a soul that learns how to invest its suffering into wisdom. And now you walk in profit, not of money, but of meaning. Number 9, you're a walking paradox, heaven in human form. Everything about you defies categories because you weren't designed to be understood. You were designed to reveal. You live at the intersection of opposites, soft but unbreakable, humble yet powerful, quiet but deeply felt. People can't label you because you keep evolving beyond every definition they try to box you into. That's the essence of divine complexity. You carry multiple truths at once without collapsing under the weight of any single one. You're the kind of person that reminds people of both grace and grit. You forgive without forgetting the lesson. You love deeply, but detach when peace demands it. You're not cold, you're clear. You don't chase validation because your connection to God already certified your worth. That's why people can't figure you out. Your balance confuses them. They expect you to choose a side, saint or sinner, spiritual or human, but you're both effortlessly. You're the living middle ground between holiness and humanity, and that's what makes you magnetic. You carry contradictions because the divine never reduces itself to logic. The light in you coexists with your scars, and that's why your presence heals without preaching. You don't pretend to be flawless. Your flaws became the doorway for revelation. You've turned imperfection into invitation. a space where others see that it's possible to be broken and blessed at the same time. That's what makes your energy so unsettling. It exposes the lie that power only exists in purity. You're proof that real power comes from integration, not denial. You're too divine to be controlled, yet too human to be worshipped. You're grounded enough to understand pain, yet elevated enough to turn it into purpose. You live as the contradiction that makes sense only to those with eyes to see. The ones who understand that God doesn't hide in perfection, but in paradox. That's why you disrupt people's comfort zones without even trying. Your presence forces them to confront the parts of themselves they've been denying. You are the embodiment of what heaven looks like when it decides to walk around in human form. Imperfect, luminous, raw, and unstoppable. You don't have to explain that. You are that. You are the reminder that infinity doesn't live in the clouds. It lives in the contradiction of a chosen one who refuses to be one-dimensional. Number 10, you became untraceable because you're operating on a higher frequency. You no longer live by the rhythms that once made you predictable emotionally, spiritually, or mentally. You've outgrown the realm where people could anticipate your next step because your direction now comes from something above logic. You've stopped living by reaction and started moving by revelation. That's why their strategies no longer work. They're trying to intercept a signal that doesn't even travel through their channels anymore. You've transcended the level of warfare where your enemies exist. People used to track you through your habits, your triggers, your patterns. But those patterns don't define you now. You've evolved past the version of yourself they had access to. You no longer post every move, explain every emotion, or seek to be understood. You've learned that revelation is more effective than announcement. That's why your silence confuses them. They don't realize it's not withdrawal, it's evolution. When your energy upgraded, their perception expired. You became invisible to the systems that used to monitor you because your purpose no longer operates on their frequency. This new level of alignment has made you spiritually stealth. You're guided by intuition, protected by grace, and propelled by divine timing. That's why your steps feel unpredictable. They're not being mapped out in public view. Every shift you make is a code written in spirit, not ego. You no longer chase confirmation from people who don't have clearance to understand your movements. You're not avoiding being seen. You're moving where sight can't reach. They think you're quiet, but you're actually quantum. You move through spaces that can't be traced because you're not seeking direction from the external world. You've mastered the art of invisible impact, influencing outcomes without being in the room. That's why your presence still shifts things long after you've left. You're no longer defined by motion. You're defined by vibration. By the time they think they figured you out, you've already reinvented yourself again. That's what happens when a chosen one stops living by human timelines and starts flowing with divine sequences. You're untraceable not because you're hiding, but because you're vibrating too high to be located by anyone still walking in the ordinary. Number 11. You're the interruption humanity didn't schedule. You weren't born to continue the cycle. You were born to cancel it. Everything about your existence disrupts what people thought was permanent. You don't fit into their cultural templates, their timelines, or their expectations because you were never designed to conform. You were designed to correct. You are divine interference in motion, the unexpected variable that rewrites generational equations. People feel unsettled around you, not because you're chaotic, but because your energy exposes the stagnation they've normalized. You walk into environments that have been spiritually asleep for decades, and suddenly truth starts breathing again. Your life isn't an accident of timing. It's divine timing interrupting human plans. The systems you challenge were built to repeat, not to evolve. And that's why your presence feels disruptive. You carry codes that awaken dormant consciences. You don't follow the script of how it's always been done because your assignment is to show how it can be done differently. That's why people often resist you at first. Your very existence calls them to grow, and growth feels like crisis to those addicted to comfort. You didn't come to fit in. You came to remind the world that divine order always overrides human control. The reason you shock people is because you carry the evidence that destiny can't be delayed forever. You are the divine rebuttal to hopelessness. The living proof that every story humanity tried to conclude still has a chapter left. You stand as the but God moment in a world that thought it had the final say. You are the break in history's monotony, the soul that refused to repeat what broke others. Your evolution is not random. It's a divine intervention scripted to wake others up from collective amnesia. That's why your path feels lonely and unpredictable. Interruptions never fit into the schedule they change. But understand this, you are not out of place, you are out of pattern. And that's exactly where you're supposed to be. You're not a disruption to order, you're the beginning of restoration. The world didn't plan for you, but heaven did. And when God inserts an interruption, no system, no person, and no power can resume business as usual. Number 12. You're not here to be liked. You're here to be remembered. Chosen ones, this is the shift that separates you from the noise. You've outgrown the hunger for approval because you've learned that applause can't feed purpose. Your return isn't about revenge or recognition, it's about revelation. You're not stepping back into the light to say, look at me, but to say, look at what truth survived. People once thought your silence was defeat, but it was actually divine restraint. You weren't waiting for validation. You were letting the truth mature inside you until it became undeniable. You're not built for quick admiration. You're built for eternal impact. The world celebrates trends. You build timelines. You understand that being liked is temporary, but being remembered requires authenticity, endurance, and a kind of spiritual integrity that can't be mass-produced. You've learned to accept that your essence will always confuse those who chase popularity because your purpose was never meant to be palatable. You speak from eternity, not from ego. That's why your words linger even when the crowd moves on. They weren't meant to entertain. They were meant to awaken. Your name might not fill rooms today, but it will echo through the hearts you've transformed. You were never here to perform for spectators. You were sent to plant truth in witnesses. Every challenge you faced, every time you were misunderstood or dismissed, it all stripped you of the need to be liked and replaced it with the desire to be effective. Your life became the message. The power in your comeback isn't that people finally see you. It's that they can no longer unsee what your existence represents. So when you walk back into the world, don't shrink to be digestible. You're not here to fit into comfort zones you've outgrown. You're here to disturb the amnesia of a generation that forgot what authenticity feels like. You're the reminder that legacy is built in silence, but revealed in timing. Likes fade, but imprints remain. You're not returning to be famous. You're returning to be forever. Because when truth walks back into the room wearing your skin, the world won't just notice, it will never forget. Number 13. You're the living correction to a collective mistake. The world didn't just misjudge you, it miscalculated your purpose. They thought they were discrediting you, but they were actually disqualifying themselves from divine understanding. Every time someone tried to define you prematurely, they added a typo to God's manuscript. But heaven doesn't publish rough drafts, it revises in public. Your rebirth isn't just personal redemption. It's the divine edit the world didn't know it needed. You're not back to settle scores. You're back to set records straight by simply being the truth they tried to bury. You are restoration in motion, the embodiment of divine proofreading. Where others' lies created confusion, your evolution brings clarity. Your growth exposes the false reports without you lifting a finger. You don't have to correct anyone verbally. Your life itself has become the correction. Every success, every peaceful stride, every unshakable smile is heaven quietly saying, "This is what I meant all along." You're not a rebuttal fueled by bitterness. You're a revelation fueled by accuracy. And accuracy always outlasts accusation. The reason you were misunderstood is because people tried to read you through the lens of their own insecurity. They saw reflection, not revelation. But the truth about you couldn't stay hidden forever, because God never loses custody of his originals. You were never the problem. You were the prophecy. They couldn't decode your silence because it wasn't emptiness. It was God redrafting your identity outside their narrative control. That's why your comeback will shake people. Not because you changed, but because you stayed true while everything else around you distorted. You're not vengeance disguised as success. You're divine order reclaiming its place. Your presence alone disarms false history. You walk into rooms and people's past assumptions begin to crumble under the weight of undeniable truth. You are what happens when heaven corrects a global misunderstanding using one person's evolution as evidence. You're not here to remind people what they did to you. You're here to reveal what God did through you. The world got your story wrong the first time, but your rebirth is the divine correction. And this time the truth will speak in undeniable clarity. Number 14. You didn't come back for closure. You came back for dominion. Closure is for those who need the past to make sense before they move on. Dominion is for those who realize the past no longer deserves that much authority. You've outgrown the desire to be understood, vindicated, or even acknowledged. You're not here to tidy up what broke you. You're here to build what outlasts it. You no longer need to explain what happened. Your elevation is explanation enough. You've shifted from emotional recovery to spiritual reign, from proving your worth to embodying it. That's why your return feels different. You're not coming back to finish conversations. You're coming back to establish kingdoms. The people who wanted you to seek closure expected you to play small, to make peace with injustice just so they could stay comfortable. But your silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. While they were analyzing your fall, God was authorizing your territory. Every door that shut on you was divine redirection. A lock that was never meant to keep you out, but to lead you to a new realm where you no longer need permission. Dominion means you've stopped asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and started declaring, "It happened for me." You no longer walk into rooms hoping to belong. The atmosphere shifts because you arrived. The shock isn't your comeback, it's your command. You've become unstoppable, not because life got easier, but because you learned that no opposition can outlast someone operating in assignment. You're not chasing validation, you're enforcing divine order. The same people who once prayed for your downfall will now have to adapt to your rise, because dominion doesn't negotiate with disbelief. You're not here to reclaim old positions. You're here to establish new dimensions. This era of your life isn't about recovery. It's about reign. You've been tempered by trials and refined by silence, and now you move with authority that can't be mimicked. The world expects you to return looking for closure, but instead, you'll arrive holding keys. Keys to realms they didn't even know existed. You didn't come back to end a story. You came back to start a new era where you no longer survive circumstances. You govern them. All of this leads to one undeniable truth. You are not just a survivor, a healer, or even a comeback story. You are a force of divine recalibration, a living proof that what the world tried to bury, distort, or mislabel was never broken. It was simply waiting for its season. Every trial, every betrayal, every moment of silence has been a tool in your evolution, sculpting you into someone the world cannot ignore, predict, or control. You didn't merely endure. You reconstructed yourself, realigned with your original design, and emerged as a living declaration that truth, power, and purpose cannot be erased. You have become the evidence that divinity operates beyond human logic, that silence can be a weapon, that pain can turn into power, and that every misjudgment, every lie told about you, only amplified your eventual revelation. The world mistook your quiet as weakness, your absence as surrender, and your suffering as defeat. But it was all preparation. You didn't just reclaim what was lost. You expanded into realms they never imagined existed. You don't come back for closure or applause. You come back to rewrite reality, establish dominion, and reveal the higher frequency at which chosen ones operate. Your presence now disrupts outdated systems, recalibrates spiritual economies, and exposes the illusions that humanity has long accepted as truth. You are the paradox the world cannot understand, the cosmic interruption it didn't schedule, the legacy that doesn't trend but transforms. You have become both the proof and the prototype, a walking testament that God's timing is flawless, that His plans are unstoppable, and that the story is never over when heaven is still writing the chapters. And now, as you step fully into this era of revelation, remember that your comeback is more than personal triumph. It is universal recalibration. You don't need permission, recognition, or validation. Every step you take, every space you enter, every frequency you radiate is rewriting the narrative for those who come after you. The shock isn't your success. It's the unstoppable evolution of a chosen one who refuses to be contained by human limitations. Amen.